always triggers are formed in childhood. It doesn't matter how good of a childhood you had, how good your parents are. There was a time when you were, a year old and your mom stopped nursing because you bit her boob for the last time, and you were probably pissed off about it. You don't remember it, but the ancient system of mitochondrial bacteria in your body notices that at that time there was anger from the baby and there was a change in nutrition. Therefore, trigger. What? Does that even make sense? It does, because there's an automated, stupid system just looking for threats or times you felt unsafe. That time you were bullied in fifth grade or whatever, it left a mark.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Thrive State Podcast. I am your host, Dr. V, triple board certified MD and performance and longevity expert. And on today's podcast, we really talk about the future of human potential with my good friend, Dave Asprey. Now, as you might have heard from a keynote or you might have seen on my social, where I really think we are going with longevity and human potential is really about our consciousness. It's not the tools and devices and the medicines that are outside of us that's trying to shift our internal state or our internal world. Yes, those things are important, but it's really about focusing on how we control our internal state, maybe even without these substances. And this really speaks to the consciousness. So I believe the future of biohacking, the future of longevity, it's all around consciousness. And today we really dive into why consciousness is so important and to introduce Dave's new book, Heavily Meditated. So if you want to know how to improve your health, how to achieve peak performance, and really live to your highest human potential, you want to listen to this podcast. If you are new to the podcast, hey, welcome in. Again, I'm Dr. V. This is the Thrive State Podcast, where every single week I get to bring on a very special guest to talk to you about the future and what's recent in biohacking and longevity of human performance. And if you are a loyal listener, if you are coming back here, welcome back. Thank you for being a loyal listener. Please, if this podcast has given you any value, consider helping it grow by leaving us a 5-star review wherever podcasts are heard, subscribing to this channel, and sharing this episode with your friends and family members. That's really, truly going to help the show out. And as a gift of my appreciation, I want to gift you with the tools and resources, everything you need to get started in your journey to your Thrive State by going to thrivestatestarter.com. There you will receive exercises that I get to change my state. Because at the end of the day, it is our state. What we feel is an energetic lens of what's happening inside our body, but it's how we reflect us out to other people. So if we want more love in our life, if we want to improve our relationships, if we want to be more successful building the next thing with other people, we have to master what's going on the inside. Because what we feel, again, isn't just an emotion. It's a lens of the state that we are in, which basically drives epigenetic change in how our biology functions and actually what we bring into the world by how we see the world, which is why today's podcast is so important. I welcome back the father of biohacking, Dave Asprey, who has a new book coming out called Heavily Meditated. And it really goes through the science of all the things that affect our internal state. Are we aware of how we are functioning? Because depending on our state, what we are thinking, what we're feeling, we're actually directing our mitochondria on how to behave. Are we sending ATP and energy on inflammation and protecting the body against stress and danger? Because if we are diverting all that energy for growth, for healing, for feeling good. So this is why this is so important. Please listen in on this very special episode with father of biohacking, Dave Asprey. Please enjoy the episode. Dave Asprey, welcome back to the Thrive State Podcast.
I'm so happy to be back, Kien. It's just good to see you, man.
It's super good to see you. And as I think back, we were just talking about how I am going to be speaking at Consumer Health Summit. And that was really the start of my entrepreneur journey and creating a personal brand. And I remember you were there. And since then, you've really been a big supporter in that. So really want to thank you.
You're so welcome. I think I've been going to that. I think my first time was like 2012, maybe.
Yeah.
It's been a while, and it's really helped me to connect with some just fascinating people, including you.
Yeah. Well, beautiful. 5 quick questions to start things off. I know this show is really going to be expanding on, I think, the new frontier of biohacking, which is really mastering our internal states. But before we dive into that, 5 quick questions, 1,000 points each. If you win, since I'm going to be at your biohacking conference, you could have me do whatever you'd like, truth or dare style stuff at the conference. But 1,000 points each. Here we go. Question number 1. If you could instantly master one brainwave state, whether it be delta, theta, alpha, beta, or gamma, which would you pick right now and why?
What makes you think I haven't? I run like the top company that teaches people that
Yeah.
stuff. And the answer, if I could just make it really fast,
Yeah.
would be that for all but one person who's very, very unusual, you actually cannot master gamma until you master one of the other ones.
Mm,
So the gamma is like a surfer that rides on a wave. If you don't have waves, you're not going to have surfers.
mm,
So therefore, I would probably have to say gamma, but understanding a brainwave is just like a musical note. Like, would you rather master a C note or D note on the piano? Well, if you don't know how to play the piano to make music, it doesn't really matter. So the idea is, what song would I play in what note?
mm. Got it. All right. 1,000 points there. Question number 2 is currently, with all the stacks of stuff that you do, what is one biohacking ritual or device you can't live with right now?
I can't live without right now, you mean?
Yeah.
I would say darkness.
Mm. Ooh, beautiful. I'm sure we're going to dive deeper into that a little bit later. Question number 3. Be honest, morning ritual, danger coffee first or meditation first?
I don't meditate every morning, so it's definitely danger coffee.
Question number 4. What's something about your inner peace journey that you would surprise people who only know you from the bulletproof side of you?
You've seen all the biohacking stuff, losing the weight and just being able to do all these things with your biology. For as long as I've worked on nutrition, I have been working with gurus and sages and meditating in caves and traveling around the world and learning altered states work, because a lot of the beginnings of bringing biohacking into the world were around, let's make your hardware work better.
Yeah.
But the why for having better hardware is so you can have better software.
Yeah.
And the things about meditation and breath work and psychedelics and altered states and ancient lineages around this, that's what do you do with the power? The power comes from the body
Yeah.
first, which lets you tune in to the other power that's out there. And I've been less forward about the stuff that's in heavily meditated, just because I don't think biohacking would have become a $63 billion industry and a global movement if, while I was talking about earthing lasers and putting butter in coffee, that was enough. Like, that was already too edgy.
Yeah.
If I'd have said, oh, and by the way, here's some other stuff, I don't think people would have been able to digest it. Even bringing longevity into the world, I learned what is now biohacking in the longevity space. And I mentioned it peripherally, and after 5 years of biohacking coming along, I wrote my big longevity book that's helped to set the stage for the modern longevity movement.
Yeah.
So just it's about introducing the right things at the right time for society to be able to absorb it without breaking. And now is the time for the consciousness work.
Oh, I definitely think that that is right on point, and I'll be touching on that in a second here. But last question on the 5 to Thrive. If you could upgrade one thing into humanity's default operating system tomorrow, what would
Wow. This is exactly what I'm working to do at multiple layers. Here's what it is. Your body, starting in the mitochondria, allocates energy according to an ancient algorithm for life. And it says, put fear first. Because if you're going to fall off a cliff, burn yourself, or get eaten by a tiger, automated systems need to take care of that because your brain is too slow. Fair. So the amount of energy that humans allocate to fear is about 9 times more than anything else. And if you meditate, about 6 times more. I just want us to learn to consciously reset that so that we only put 5 times more energy into fear, and we shift that extra energy that's left over
Oh.
into our intimate relationships and our community. If we could do that, we would create a golden age for humans. And the good news is we can do that just consciously by learning techniques to control your state.
Beautiful. 5,000 points there, which means I get to be your guinea pig at the biohacking conference, which is happening after your book launch. So why don't you give us the dates for that as well.
All right. Biohackingconference.com, May 28th, 29th, and 30th, Austin, Texas. 4,000 people. You'll see me on stage, Joe Dispenza, James Nestor, who is a major author in the world of breath, Ryan Holiday talking about stoicism, one of my shamanic teachers, Alberto Viodo, and the list goes on and on. Even Kasia Urbanaic, who is the author of the most important personal development book for women I've ever seen, was a very rare speaker, will be there. So it's going to be basically a party. Oh, and Steve Aoki will be playing. And not to mention, they're going to see you, which is the biggest draw of all, of course.
Well, thank you for that, Dave. This book couldn't come in the perfect time. And as you were saying before, it probably wouldn't have been as well received in the past. I entered the biohacking longevity space and I really focused on hormone optimizations and all the gadgets initially. But as I started working with clients, I started to notice the biggest mover was really working on the stuff inside and, became a ketamine facilitator as well as breathwork facilitator. Today's conversation is really diving into this space, and your book, Heavily Meditated, is really a great, I would say, opening for the quantum leap that's happening in this space right now. So, there's a really interesting study that I think complements your book, and it really talks about mitochondria and the role. And it was Alyssa Epple and Martin Picard that looked at emotions, and they studied these caregivers, and they had noticed that they started studying their emotions throughout the day, and they noticed that the caregivers that were in more states of anger, fear, resentment, hurt, that their mitochondrial efficiency was much lower than those that reported emotions of gratitude, of feeling connected and loved. And so how we perceive the world and the emotions that we share are actually triggers for our mitochondria. And then our mitochondria not only make the energy, but it's directing where energy is going. So the ones that are in fear and stress, they're directing energy towards inflammation, which usurps energy for our immune system, etc. That was a very powerful study, and I think why this book is so important. When did you realize that biohacking wasn't about the body? And it seems like you've always known, but you just haven't really fostered this message forward. And what would you say to people in terms of why they should focus on really upgrading the states that we live in moment to moment?
The world of biohacking looks like this. Your body makes a certain amount of energy every day, and then it allocates energy according to some steps that are written out in Heavily Meditated. All life on earth does this, and it's in order. Number one, if something's scary, you got to run away from, kill, or hide. Okay, that's fear, first F word. Then food, eat everything because there might be a famine and life is dumb. There's a lot of it, but it's only concerned about now. It doesn't even understand time. So fear, food. And then the next one, all life has to do it to stay around forever. Can you imagine what that F word is?
Family, or the ways to make family.
I was going to say fertility, but I thought you were going to drop an F-bomb on your own show. So good job dodging that bullet. So yeah, fear, food, fertility, but that one. So your body processes reality and it has a third of a second to do that before your brain gets the first brainwave that something happened. Have you ever done anything you're ashamed of that isn't from one of those three things?
No. Yeah.
Nobody has.
No.
So basically, it's your mitochondria's fault. And the reality is that you have a separate consciousness inside your body. It's a distributed consciousness around trillions of ancient bacteria trying to keep the petri dish of your body alive. So they do fear, then they do food, then they do reproduction. And then the next F word is friend. They work with each other and they cause you to work with other humans and other life around you to make the world better. We call that community. And the final F word is forgiveness. And this is the process of improving yourself by letting go of fear, letting go of hunger, letting go of loneliness, and turning those into peace. So fear becomes peace. Hunger becomes nourishment. Loneliness becomes nourishing, sacred intimacy, and community, instead of another form of loneliness, comes into a source of nourishment as well. And what's left is abundant energy. So your job as a biohacker is make your body better at making energy so you have enough to flow through all those things, and then stop wasting it on triggers in fear and triggers in hunger and triggers in loneliness. And if you look at the books I've written and you look at the things that I do in the world, they're always around those things. More energy, less fear, less hunger, less loneliness, more connection. If we just get that right, everything works. And it sounds so stupid. What do you mean going outside and getting sunlight in my eyes for 20 minutes is going to make me a better lover? Actually, yes, because you'll improve your mitochondrial function. So you have more energy to overcome your fear and you have enough energy left to go to that F word, right? And will it make you a better friend? Yes, because you need more energy and you need to waste less energy. That's all you have to do to live as long as you want and to have a better life. And to be able to allocate energy efficiently, you better learn how to meditate and be conscious. Like it's not that hard. It's just invisible to our consciousness to know that this is how it works.
Yeah, as you mentioned triggers, I would love for you to kind of maybe dive in a little bit on the role of our upbringing or potentially even our ancestrals' experiences. Because if we look at triggers, look, if you throw a snake in front of me versus, a trained snake charmer, we're going to have different responses, right? So our nervous system is trained differently based on the type of emotional experience experienced by ourselves and our ancestors. So can we talk a little bit about triggers and where they might be coming from?
Sure. What I'm sharing is in heavily meditated, and it comes from more than 10 years of working with more than 1,000 CEOs and executives for 5 days. They come into the brain upgrade program there. We glue electrodes to their head and we teach them meditation states. So this is data driven and experience driven by going through and finding triggers, uncovering the root cause, and then erasing them so that they're no longer triggers. Always triggers are formed in childhood. It doesn't matter how good of a childhood you had, how good your parents are. There was a time when you were, a year old and your mom stopped nursing because you bit her boob for the last time, and you were probably pissed off about it. You don't remember it, but the ancient system of mitochondrial bacteria in your body notices that at that time there was anger from the baby and there was a change in nutrition. Therefore, trigger. What? Does that even make sense? It does, because there's an automated, stupid system just looking for threats or times you felt unsafe. That time you were bullied in fifth grade or whatever, it left a mark. Case in point, a friend who went through 40 years of Zen, and it's confidential who goes unless they want to talk about it. His name's Craig because he's open. He posted on Facebook, guys, I run a 1,200 person company. And I just realized that all of my entrepreneurial success is because I was bullied in middle school. I'm
Mm.
just trying to prove I'm good enough. And he was not a happy guy. Realizing that lets you move what you're doing in life. Not running away from things that your body thinks are scary and therefore you think are scary, but you're moving towards something that's meaningful to you, towards your mission and towards your purpose. And that's how important it all is.
No, absolutely. I mean, this isn't only good for happiness, but it affects our physical health. I was a medical doctor 10 years ago in the hospital system, overweight, diabetic, run out because I had the very same thing. I was a boat refugee to this country, constantly being teased when I was younger. And so the whole story of not being good enough was what was leading my life. And I was unconsciously, being triggered by life all the time, chasing this thing called success that made my nervous system think that I was in danger all the time, and living that way, living in that state actually produced diabetes, high blood pressure, and I was on several prescription medications. So doing this work of healing not only shifts our emotional states, but those things also shift our physical states and making us put us back in the driver's seat of the messages that we're giving to ourselves and mitochondria. Yeah.
You nailed it. And it's funny, we have trauma from this life. And when people go through their big triggers and remove them at 40 years of Zen, they usually go down three paths. Like, okay, I figure I got all my early childhood stuff out of it. Then some people are like, this is weird, but I feel like the way I was born and my experience in the womb might have shaped me. And the rational computer science 25-year-old me would say, you don't remember that. That's dumb. However, your body remembers it.
Yeah.
And there's now 40 years of science showing that conditions inside the womb and during birth affect personality traits, especially trauma. I was born with a cord wrapped around my neck, which actually caused my physiological PTSD until I went back and I healed it. I don't have it anymore, but I did for 30 years of my life before someone told me that was going on. Some people go down like a birth and gestation path. Some people go down a generational trauma path. And if your family has been forcibly dislocated from your culture and your country, which is what happened to you. It wasn't just you, it was your parents and probably their parents. Like, so there's histories of this. You see this in anyone who's emigrated against their will. There's deep generational trauma, and you will pass it off to your children unconsciously and invisibly until you do something about it. So anyone listening to this, you can be the last one in your line that passes the garbage down that may have been there for 100 generations. And then a third group of people, when they're at 40 years of Zen, will say, I don't understand this, but I'm seeing things that I know are me, but they don't look or feel like me, and they're in a different language. And their experience of those patterns are that they're past lives. I actually do believe in past lives. I didn't used to when I was young. I thought that was a bunch of nonsense and you could never prove it. I think I was wrong back then, but it doesn't matter if you believe in them or not. If you say, I don't believe in past lives, and all of a sudden you're experiencing something weird, dude, do the work on it. Consider it a hallucination. If the work creates results in your life that you like, then the work worked. And it doesn't matter what you believe. So it's pretty weird, but it's very reliable. You will go down one of those three paths after you clear out the obvious things that are blocking you from your childhood. It's just how it works.
As you mentioned that, I was thinking about a study because people were, all talk about how do we inherit these things from our parents? And so I just want to give this experiment that we know of that talks about this transgenerational epigenetic transference. And what they did was they had these rats and they conditioned these rats to fear the smell of cherries. So every time basically they would expose these rats to the smell of cherries and then shock them each time and until they got to the point where you just expose them to the smell of cherries and they would start quivering. Well, get this. They started to breed these rats, and 2 generations down, the grandchildren of those rats that never got exposed to any of the shock,
Mm-hmm.
once you start to expose them to the smell of cherries, they started to quiver. And what they started to notice was there were actually epigenetic marks left on the rats that got conditioned into their genes that got passed down. And that's a way that, I guess protects the species from danger out in the world so that we wouldn't experience that again. Unfortunately, we're not actually physically exposed to those dangers. Not recognizing that trigger can actually lead to disease in our body.
You're 100% right. There are things, if your grandparents or great grandparents went through a famine, your odds of getting type 2 diabetes are higher. And maybe the most reliable of this, Dr. Stephen Porges has been on my podcast a couple times. And he's the guy who figured out how the vagus nerve in the body works. They call it the wandering nerve, and it controls your sympathetic or your fight or flight response, among other things. He developed a sound technology that drops people into a healing state. That's pretty profound. So he'll play this in a room full of people. And when he does that in North America, he always has a team of therapists because, 5-10% of people are going to have a really deep, profound trauma releasing experience and they'll have to go off with a therapist. He goes to London. And in London, he plays the sound. And the entire room starts to melt down. And after maybe 20, 30 seconds of it, they actually stopped it because everyone in London was traumatized. Why? Because if you were a native Londoner, well, your parents or grandparents lived through the bombings of London. So you have generational trauma. And if you're an immigrant to London, immigrants typically have the trauma of not being safe in their own country and having to leave their culture. And that is highly traumatic to us as animals, to our species. And the trauma's in the body. And of course, the body's going to try to stay safe, and it's going to communicate via genetic and probably energetic mechanisms to the next generation. Don't make the mistakes I made. I almost died. It just makes sense.
Yeah. Absolutely. I don't think people recognize this enough, but the more we see, the biohacking, the personal development space start to evolve, we're really starting to see that this is the crux of the work that is important not only for our health, but our relationships and what we want to succeed out in the world, because these childhood traumas almost sort of act as a lens of the possibilities of life. If we were a certain expression of energy, these traumas almost kind of filter everything out to this lens. And that's how we perceive the world and all the energy that's out in the world. Like if they're if we were seeing the world as I'm not enough or I'm not worthy, you're not going to be able to see the abundance that's naturally out there, the sunlight, the people, the opportunities. But that's also the message that you're reflecting back to yourselves on a moment to moment basis, which is why, I find this work not only important for our physical health, but when we talk about longevity, when we talk about peak performance and human potential, that's really the crux of this work. I'm wondering if you're starting to find that that's the way the biohacking space is heading towards.
It's heading that way in large part because I designed it that way. I have a 25 plus year vision for the biohacking movement. The way I started it was mindful and intentional. And the goal is to install some new awareness into our culture and our society, which sounds really as a big goal. And who am I to do that? I don't know. I'm just doing my best here. I could be wrong. So, what's happening here is if you look at an Instagram or a TikTok filter, it changes how you see reality, right? What makes you think that your body's operating system doesn't have a set of filters? Of course it does, because there is no way that your brain can comprehend reality. It's too big. So, one of the two most accurate models of consciousness is that your body, in fact, all life makes a user interface on the actual universe that's best fit for us to survive. So naturally, an untraumatized human, if there was one, would see the world one way, no filters, right? And then suddenly something happens and you get a filter that makes it easier to survive. Snakes are scary, right? Turns out only some of them are poisonous, but man, that snakes are scary filter is a good filter. But you could install a better filter, right? So really, what is meditation? What is all the personal development stuff that's in heavily meditated? It's how do I turn off the filters that aren't very good filters? And how do I install filters that more accurately and usefully represent reality so I can be in my body, I can be conscious, and I can be impossible to trigger. And that makes me the most powerful agent for doing good in the world. How do I know you'll do good in the world? Because we're wired in our bones to support our community and to support the world around us. We just have to not be traumatized. If you're running a filter that says everyone who looks like X is a bad person, that is a really harmful filter, but you don't know you're running it. And it feels and looks true. And that's why you can be, a misogynist. You can hate all men, you can hate all women, you can hate all gay people, you can hate all black people, you can hate all white people. Those are just stupid ass filters installed in your operating system, and they look and feel real.
Yeah.
They're just not useful. So by going through and doing deep resetting work, which is the name of the process from 40 years of Zen, people spend about 20 grand a week to come, CEOs do, and have neuroscientists work with them to help get rid of all their triggers. I'm giving away the process in Heavily Meditated. I also had Daryl Davis on my podcast recently. This is a black man who converted hundreds of KKK members. They actually sent him their robes by coming in and being curious, which is one of the antidotes for fear, right? So you can turn off whatever filters you have, and the more grounded and present you are in your body, the more people around you can sense that they have inappropriate filters on their nervous systems.
I hope you're enjoying the podcast so far. If you are, I just wanted to let you know, join our community. There's so many free resources and a great community of people that desire health, happiness, human potential, to have more in their life, more health, more energy. And when you have those two things together, you could create more happiness, more abundance, whether it be financial, romantic, all these things in your life. And if you're just starting out, you don't know where to go, just sign up for ThriveStateStarter.com, because in there you're going to get a bundle of information that includes a longevity ebook, a longevity and performance resource guide, lecture notes that come from my keynotes at Google, at Fortune 500 companies, all the insights in that keynote in lecture slide form given to you. And then finally, breathwork. I share 3 powerful breathwork exercises to access calm, which really gives you clarity and peace during the day, to access energy if you need to wake up and really motivate yourself, and finally a breathwork routine that you could do every single morning so that you could be very intentional with how you create that day.
You can find all this stuff delivered free to your inbox at thrivestatestarter.com. And our community is growing. If you want to be a part of a community of people that desire the Thrive State, that are really in Thrive State themselves and help other people along with that, you could be a part of the community. You can get group coaching from me. We do breathwork sessions, meditation sessions, and you also get to drop in and participate in podcasts in the future. You could find more about the community at mythrivestate.com. That's mythrivestate.com. So check out those resources. You're not going to be disappointed, and please enjoy the remainder of this podcast.
This is so beautiful, and it really expands on the work that I'm doing, which is very similar, which is really just allowing people to remember who we actually are. If we kind of look at all of life, life is fractal. If we take a look at, our human body, it's made up of organ systems. Each organ is an ecosystem that is made up of individual cells. And if we take a look at individual cells, an ecosystem made up of organelles, all interdependently working together. And we'll break that down even more. We got atoms, subatomic molecules, energy pockets, all these fractals. And we start to actually look at ourselves. We as human beings are actually individual cells in the body and the consciousness of our families, of our teams, of our communities. But because of these filters, we forget that we are connected, which is why, I think this is such important work, because once we start to feel that way, once we start to remember that we are connected, that we don't have to be fearful, what then happens is what you had stated earlier, is we have all this additional capacity rather than to protect ourselves to actually be and fulfill our greatest potential. And I'm right there with you in that journey that you see in terms of the possibility of what humanity can become. So can you walk us through that process of what this 25-year vision looks like for you?
Well, it starts with understanding that depending on your age, that you're likely to have different desires and that that's okay. So if you're 60 years old, you probably care a little bit about longevity and aging, right? Because you've seen it. Ooh, that's not going to end well if I don't do something. But if I talk to you when you're 19 or 20 years old, you're probably not going to really care about that. And that's normal and healthy. And you might say, well, I should care about that. No, actually, your body shouldn't. Because when you're in your 20s, your job is to find your tribe and find your, we'll call it your mate, a likely life partner, or at least long-term partner. So if you're instead focused on longevity, you're just afraid of death. And you're missing out on what you're supposed to be doing, which is why I'm all about living to at least 180 and having, abundant happiness and energy. But death that's fine. And whenever I'm ready, I'm happy. I just want to choose how I go. That's fine. So, but if you're, in your 40s, what are you like? Oh, well, wait, I noticed I can't drink 4 nights a week. What am I going to do about that? So it's okay. How do I sustain my energy? How do I take care of my family? So understanding those are natural and normal and healthy. And how do we make it so that your body has more energy? And like I said, fear is the first one. Ken, what is the opposite of fear?
Love.
So in Heavily Meditated, I go through the kind of the debate about this. A lot of people will say love is the opposite of fear. I would argue that peace is the opposite of fear. Because when you're in a state of peace, you can express love fully and completely. When you're in a state of fear, you can have some love, but you don't get the deep love. You don't get the all-encompassing love. I believe you can turn fear into peace, which frees up an enormous ball of energy because that's where most of it gets wasted.
Yeah.
And it flows down. And the body says, am I well nourished? Like you can turn hunger and cravings into nourishment if you just know how to eat and not have toxins. And then, God, I didn't waste the energy thinking about tacos. By the way, a third of the average person's thoughts are about their next meal, unless you've done something to fix that. And now you go, oh my gosh, what's next is fertility. So what can I do to turn loneliness and porn and all the lust side of things, which is one of the 7 deadly sins, into a nourishing, sacred form of connection that is one of the most valuable paths for entering an altered state to improve yourself.
Yeah.
And I read there's a whole chapter in Heavily Meditated about 20% of people report meeting God during orgasm at least once in their life. So this is as important as psychedelics and breath work if you're interested in learning how to get into your operating console and change the settings in your body. You can do it in the bedroom, you can do it in the monastery. It's the same states. You can get there via different paths, and I just write down all the paths, and you find the one that appeals to you the most. So no, I didn't waste any energy on fear because I had peace. I didn't waste anything on hunger because I had nourishment. And I turned all of my reproductive stuff into a source of nourishment and energy producing instead of draining. And wow, there's so much left for my community. And your community will support you if you support your community. And that becomes a source of energy. And now you went through the whole stack and you didn't waste one electron from your mitochondria on anything. And all you did was you supported your body so that you're alive, and all the rest of this is left, and you put as much as you wanted into your community, but you got it all back.
Mm.
Wow, what's gonna be left? The final F word is forgiveness. And forgiveness is how humans evolve. And forgiveness is the process of going back and finding any trigger of any sort and resetting it and turning it off. And what that means is that your trauma isn't just psychological, it's metabolic. And that forgiveness, not telling someone that you forgive them, not saying that whatever they did was okay. It's just turning off your biological reactivity to something that looks like that before. Forgiveness is neurological freedom. It's the ability to choose your state no matter what's happening around you.
Yeah.
And the reality is, if I can make fun of your diet or your pants or your weight or anything else, you're my puppet. I am in control of you if I can trigger you.
Yep.
Right? So all of us, it is our moral obligation to be unprogrammable and untriggerable. That means the government can't fool you with whatever stupid stuff they're doing. It means the marketing agencies can't trick you into spraying yourself with Axe body spray. Right? It's like none of this. So you're free. Like I'm just going to be aware and I'll choose what I want to do. And that brings so much peace and joy and freedom and happiness. That's what is required for us. Because the sad truth is that we pick up other people's emotions. We don't do it consciously unless we've done training or we were just born with that awareness. So if you're biologically wrecked, your mitochondria are in chaos, your brainwaves are in chaos, and you walk into a room, you're not going to make it a better place. But if you are abundantly powerful and energetic, and you are feeling peaceful, and you are feeling calm and in control, and you're not worried about food, and you're just aware, you raise the vibration of the whole room.
Yep.
And people say, what, you can't raise vibration. That's not science. Bullshit. It's not science. If you go back to the Heart Math Institute research, I was an advisor to the company in 2008 and a certified coach. They are measuring changes in variability of heart rate. When one person walks into a room, they change other people's heart rate variabilities.
Absolutely.
We are attuned invisibly to each other.
Yep.
Be the most powerful, most beautiful, most present, most peaceful vibration in the room, and others will follow without their knowledge or consent, unless they have done the similar amount of training and they choose not to follow, which would be stupid because if they've done the training, Mother Nature and biology will draw them into the same vibrational state as you anyway.
This is really great that you had mentioned this stuff, and it's right on par with my next work, which is really understanding this bioenergetic intelligence. It's really the consciousness that we are being, the filters we can be aware of, and therefore the energy that we express not only to other people, but to every single cell in our body. That energy carries information, which allows us to feel each other. And you're right. Just like we are individual cells in the body that is humanity, we've got these Bluetooth and Wi-Fi receptors for each other.
Yes.
And when we start to understand that fear can spread very, very quickly, and actually it spreads maybe a little bit more quickly than peace, but for those of us that do the work, that could hold the attention and intentions to stay in that frequency, it starts to bleed into the people that are around us, and we start changing into a new world from that.
It really does. And it's not as hard as you might think.
Yeah.
But it can be scary. Just to be really clear about it. There are times when it feels like I'm going to die if I face changing this Instagram filter.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
The reality is you change the filter you have on reality, and doing it is scary. It's scary for good reason. because your ego, your operating system in your body, it believes that if you are in charge of you, you will do a bad job, therefore you'll die. And it will fight with everything in it to
Mhm.
stop you from being in charge of yourself.
Yeah.
And the reset process is the best technology I've been able to find in 10 years of digging through thousands of people's brainwaves, including my own, to say, well, okay, it believes that. It's a separate consciousness riding around inside my hardware, and it has a really good job. Your mitochondria are decision makers to keep you alive when you're not paying attention. They're opening and closing sphincters, they're beating hearts, they're taking breaths, they're blinking eyes, and they're making sure that there are no actual tigers. But if they think your mother-in-law is a tiger, we have a problem and you have to turn that off. Another analogy, Ken, from Heavily Meditated, is imagine a big Labrador retriever. The dog comes in, it jumps on the furniture, it chews up your shoes, it slobbers everywhere, it eats food off your plate and barks. You're like, good God. Or it's a service dog. It walks in, you put a piece of popcorn on its nose and it just sits there until you tell it it's allowed to eat. Which nervous system do you want? You get to pick. Like, I don't want the floppy Labrador. I want the well-trained service dog that keeps my body alive when I'm not looking. Oh, what does it also look like? Way less stress. If you have less stress, you live longer and you're happier. Like, everybody wins in something like that.
Well, with something you said earlier, I think ties into a couple concepts I think I want to bring to the forefront, of really our consciousness in terms of why we want to live longer. You mentioned earlier, right? If we want to live longer because we don't want to die, there's a filter that says, I fear death. And those
Mhm.
out there that have a slogan, don't die, I think are missing the point because it drives that fear filter. However, if your reason for living longer is almost to do what we're meant to do, to be a healthy cell that's contributing to others, that's receiving the gifts of the other people in our community, that does something very, very special because we've shown in scientific studies that having purpose gives us an extra 7 to 10 years of life. And what we do know is if you just give freely without expecting anything in return, this is what you start mentioning when you talk about community, we're turning off the part of our brain and those filters that think I'm missing something. When you start to give freely, you're sending signals to your nervous system that you are safe, that you are loved, that you are connected, which also drives the biology of performing better and living longer. So I just wanted to reiterate what you said there when you were speaking about all of that. Now, you mentioned just now, and look, I've been to 40 years of Zen, definitely a game changer. Maybe expensive for some people, but that reset process I find is very simple. Now, without going through the reset process, can you maybe just walk us through the steps in the process? And this is what you're going to get when you read the book. It's just a very simple framework that anyone can do without the electrodes to start working on these triggers in their life.
And you absolutely can do it without the electrodes. It's helpful to have a friend who's also doing it or a small group, and I'm teaching people how to do that now. And I'm not going to give all the instructions right now because there's some level of detail, especially around kind of the way you set up the wording of it that's in Heavily Meditated. But I'm going to show the basic parts. So you imagine a time when you've been triggered by something. And when I do this with large groups, like at the biohacking conference, I'll do it. Don't pick a major trauma in your life because this is going to work, but it's going to have a release. And so if you're in a place to do deep work, then do it. But if it's at a big conference, that may not be the place to do the deep work. Pick out someone who cut you off in line, cut you off in traffic, someone who said something mean at Starbucks. And by the way, you shouldn't be going there anyway to get that nasty coffee. Drink some danger coffee. But whatever, like someone who really like got under your skin, or maybe a troll comment on social media, right? Something small, but it feels big. And once you've got that, you tune into how it feels inside your body, right? And this requires 1 to 2 minutes of actually feeling uncomfortable. And you, instead of pushing it away the way you would with the troll comment, like, oh, wow, that really did make me feel whatever it was. And once you've really got that feeling, you imagine this other person sitting across from you and you use words to say, you did X, and it's to be very specific, and it made me feel Y. So you said I was fat and dumb and ugly on social media, and it made me feel unloved and unworthy. Okay. And you feel how unloved and unworthy it made you. If you do not feel it, this does not work. And this is the scary part. And then once you've really tapped into it and you're feeling all sweaty and agitated, then you find a good thing that happened. What? This is gratitude. It is the most important thing that's missing from most work on forgiveness, is that gratitude or awe are the only two things that will allow you to enter a state of forgiveness. This is part of the reset process. So what do you mean there's one good thing that came from that social media comment? Yeah. The algorithm now says that your content is more engaging, right? Every time a troll comes to your website, dude, they're following you and they're commenting. Win, right? So all of a sudden, the curiosity helps, but then you're like, oh, I can actually be grateful. I got more engagement from this person, right? And then once you've done that, you sit the other person who's sitting across from you and you look at them through their own eyes and you say, I wonder what happened to them to make them that way. Like they're a troll. Was it because they were bullied and they never got over it? And now they're, a keyboard warrior who's 40 years old, drinking diet soda behind their keyboard with nothing else to do but that. Or maybe their parents were mean to them, or maybe they're just having a bad day. And you realize you know nothing about them, but what they did was never about you anyway. It was just about them, right? And you suddenly feel that first you have empathy and then you grow into compassion. Like, I actually hope this guy recovers. Like, oh my gosh, I wonder what's wrong with him, right? And if you do this deeply, you can actually do this reset process to the point that you're like, you know what? I can actually love this person as a fellow flawed human because I've probably said something mean online too. It's just another human being. We're all part of the same species. Our mitochondria are probably all talking to each other anyway. And like, I just let it go. And there's a deep sense. This is why the neurofeedback is so helpful. There's a deep feeling around the heart. And when I teach at the biohacking conference, I go into more detail about how the heart works and all this. But when you do that, your body says, wait a minute, wait a minute. 1 minute ago, I was feeling this deep sense of angst from the mean troll. And then suddenly I was feeling curiosity and gratitude. And now I'm feeling like an expansive connectedness. You know what? That first feeling must have been a mistake, right? And because it was a mistake, now I don't have to worry anymore. And it permanently removes that. It's the same thing as if on your phone, if you had alerts turned on for everything, you could never actually do anything with your phone. It's like popping up all the time. Well, if you turn off the alerts from TikTok, you get less alerts and you can use your phone more. You just turned off this alert from that kind of trolling. So now you can get more work done because it won't take energy from you ever again. And the reason 40 years of Zen is so potent is that we're doing it with facilitators and there's very deep work and we have the equivalent of a lie detector on your head. So if you're working to go deep on this, it's very likely that your body is going to tell you that you've let it go, but you haven't really, right? So our ability to deceive ourselves is pretty strong. This is like why neuroscience can be helpful, but it works at home. The final step that is critically important, one of the things that your operating system or your ego can do is it can make you forget stuff because it can make it so you don't notice things in your environment that aren't useful for you. So if you do deep work on forgetting something or resetting something, you don't forget that what happened, you just have no emotion around it anymore. The weird thing is if you don't write it down and with a pencil, it doesn't work, or a pen, it doesn't work as well if you type it, but it still works. Or you record it with your voice, or you tell a friend, you will forget it. And I have worked with clients, very powerful people who have an incredible breakthrough and they'll have an awareness of why they're doing something and they'll run the reset process and 5 minutes later, they can't remember what they did. And this is the operating system ego working to reclaim control over you so you don't have control. So this is why the reset process is so important. That's why you write it down, because once it's written down, your ego knows if it tries to make you forget it, you'll read it and then your ego will be caught and it hates being noticed. Even now, some people listening to this are feeling uncomfortable because there's a part of them going, he's pointing out that I'm in here. You're not supposed to know that I'm in here running things. It's like an invisible layer fucking with your reality.
Oh, that's beautiful. And I mean, again, such a simple process. And, each time you do this, there's another filter you lose. There's another filter that you lose. And then you start to really understand that, anytime you get triggered, that's something in you, not in the other person. Because once you start doing enough of this work, nothing starts to get to you. And I love this work also because it gives us true compassion, recognizing that, it's hurt people that hurt people. And recognizing other people with their own filters from their own upbringing and really gives us a place to recognize, forgive ourselves, forgive other people, and to truly connect as how we're meant to be, these individual selves that all belong, that are deeply connected to each other. So beautiful vision there, Dave. We're running short on time. Otherwise, I'd ask you to lead us through a process right now. But before we go, why don't you give us the details? The book is going to be coming out very soon after the release of this, but go ahead and give us the details of the book, and then also how people follow you and see you at the Biohacking Conference again.
So pick up your phone right now and go to your favorite place to buy books and order Heavily Meditated by Dave Asprey. And the book will teach you the reset process. It also goes through all of the other available paths to enter an altered state to reprogram yourself or to enter states of high performance. This can be breath work, it can be the tantric practice, it can be psychedelics. I go through all of them. This is the instruction manual for how to get inside your own operating system to upgrade yourself. And you're going to read it, and something in that book is going to stand out and say, aha, I felt it in my gut. That's the thing I want to go do. And then go do that. Whether it's breath work or meditation, it doesn't matter. So there's the types of breath work separated out into what they'll do for your nervous system so you can have the state you choose. That's Heavily Meditated, and you want to order it now, get the audiobook or the print book. And after that, go to biohackingconference.com, come hang out with Kien and me and Joe Dispenza and James Nestor and Ryan Holiday and so many other incredible speakers and 4,000 people vibing like we are right now. You want to increase your mitochondrial function, hang out with a community like that. It's so cool. And learn to live an extra 50 or 60 years. Why not? And then go to daveasprey.com and you can follow me on all the platforms and stuff there. Podcast, 500 million plus downloads, called The Human Upgrade. And, happy to see you there.
Okay, last question for you, Dave. I mean, I've asked you every time you've been on, but I wonder if it's shifted since. But, recently, of everything that you've done, what has been your best medicine?
Lately, I have been doing a lot of relationship coaching. My girlfriend's a top relationship expert, Christina Weber, and her company, We Deepen, does relationship masterminds for entrepreneurs, where couples and singles come in, and we work with Annie Lala and Rod Harris and other top relationship coaches, and we do a hot seat where people talk about what's really going on in their relationship and receive coaching the way you and I would at an entrepreneur mastermind. Like, here's what I'm doing wrong in my business. No. So if you look at your relationship as a form of nourishment and as something that you cultivate and manage, doing that with intent and consciousness is really magical. So for me, being able to sit and help others with some of this understanding of the nervous system so that they can have healthier, more successful, more nourishing relationships has been really, really fun. And that's called We Deepen.
Oh, so good. And definitely check that out. I have to say that my relationship has almost been one of the best forms of being in a spiritual dojo, because they're going to bring up the triggers for us to be able to work on this stuff. Yeah.
91.7% of people who complete 40 years of Zen report improved relationships after six months out, after they've had a chance to process everything. And if you're in a relationship where one of your 4 core values is growth, every time your partner triggers you, after you get over your trigger, you can say thank you.
Yeah.
Because any trigger you have, just go do the reset process.
Yeah.
And you realize, oh my God, it wasn't my partner's fault. It was my fault. And if it was your partner's fault because they were doing something, they didn't choose to do it. It's because it was their triggers running them. And then you can point out their triggers and you play basically volleyball. No, that's your crap. No, that's your crap. And eventually you both unload it. And then I wonder what it would be like.
Beautiful. Dave Asprey, it's been a pleasure once again. Can't wait to connect with you in real life very soon. And thank you for being on the Thrive State podcast.
You're welcome, Ken. Thanks for your work in the world.
I hope you enjoy that episode of the Thrive State podcast. And if you're finding that this content is really helping you and your family members, please consider supporting our mission and our cause of elevating health, happiness, and human potential for people all over the world. You can do so by making sure that you subscribe to this podcast, sharing it with your friends and family members, and leaving us a 5-star review wherever podcasts are heard. All these things are going to really help elevate the show and to give us the resources to continue to bring more content just like this to yourself as well as the people that you love. If you haven't already, you might want to consider joining our community. We actually have a community where people get to engage with me in group sessions where we do breath work, meditation, where we do challenges together, really to be able to get us access to health, happiness, human potential, so that we could have longevity and performance in our life as well. You can check out our community at mythrivestate.com. That's mythrivestate.com. And if you haven't already, pick up a copy of my book, Thrive State. It really gives you all the tools, the pillars that you need to create a blueprint to control the energetics of your life. Who are you? How you show up in the world? The choices that you consistently make create an energy in your body, and you can control this. And when you can control that, you also control the messages you give to your DNA that gives you access, again, to optimal health, longevity, and peak performance. And let me also just share a free gift to you. If you haven't already, please pick up my longevity and performance bundle where I share lecture notes, ebooks, breathwork exercises, and longevity and performance resources at thrivestatestarter.com. Thank you so much for being a part of this community. Thank you for helping us grow. Remember always, my friends, that you are your best medicine.